Joining us now, MS Now Capitol Hill reporter Kevin Fry, co-founder of Punchbowl News himself, and MS Now political contributor Jake Sherman, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Roiphe, and former New York Democratic Congressman Max Rose. He is a senior advisor to VoteVet. So, Kevin, starting with you, your reporting shows that Democrats are preparing for a real possibility of election interference by the Trump administration. What scenarios are they gaming out at this point? How seriously are they taking this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the fact that they are really trying to shield a lot of public knowledge about this because they want to keep this as secret as possible, because they are fearful that the lawmakers that are involved and certainly the outside groups that they're working with, be it independent nonprofits or law firms, that if their names are released publicly, there will be a blowback against them, reprisals from the president. But at least what we do know from these conversations is, one, about more than 24 participated in this tabletop exercise this week, and then it lasted about an hour and a half. Joe Morelli is the man that is coordinating all of this. He's the top Democrat on the House Administration Committee. And he told me that, look, they're gaming out these 100-plus scenarios, some of them high likelihood of happening, but maybe low impact, some low likelihood of happening, but high impact. And some of these stretch from, the potential of deploying ICE or the National Guard to polling places, which could try to, disincentivize folks from actually coming to the polls. There is the concern that he could try to activate aspects through executive fiat, aspects of the Save America Act that he's been pushing for so dramatically, including, of course, this provision that would require proof of citizenship to actually vote. In terms of how they're gaming this out, though, and they're not getting too specific on the details, they did tell me they have lawyers lined up across the country that are ready to file at the drop of a hat should anything pop up. But beyond the legal question, and this is what I pressed lawmakers on, what else can you do? Are you basically at the whim of what a judge is going to rule in on and how quickly they act on that? And this is where they're looking at an education campaign to make sure that local elected officials and voters are informed of their rights and know how to proceed, and that everyone is basically in lockstep as they enter into these last critical months before the midterms.
Kevin Fry, thank you for that exclusive reporting. Max, does it serve Democrats to zero in on this 2020 election denial situation, or should they just not touch this with a 10-foot pole?
They should talk about 26, and they should talk about 26 in the context of 2020. This is not like theoretical. This dude has tried to interfere in previous elections and has used violence and incited violence to do so. The irony of the past decade is that Donald Trump has won elections when Democrats had the White House, and he didn't complain about election interference. He only complains about election interference when he has the White House. It's ludicrous down to its core. So the guy starts to talk about this when he knows he's going to lose. He knows he's going to lose because his presidency has been an utter failure, a failure to address affordability, failure to end forever wars. So they're going to do something. And so beyond the Democrats talking about 26, they should actually be talking about what are the solutions to stop him from doing this.
Rebecca, there are these warnings from Democrats saying that the president could deploy ICE to election venues that, as Kevin was mentioning, I would love to get your thoughts on trying to, as he put it, activate parts of the SAVE Act, even if the act doesn't pass. How does he do that? Is it legal? And what kind of challenges could he face if we do see some of these actions taken by the president?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions, Ariel. I think, there are actually two questions there. Is one, is it legal? And two, would the challenge be able to go forward fast enough to stop it? And I think
we've seen that in so many cases.
In so many cases, what he's managed to do is kind of create a world outside of the law by acting really quickly and making it such that challenges are pretty ineffective because they come after the fact. So I think the answer to the first question is probably not. Elections are by constitutional design largely a state issue for certain reasons. And that, another irony here, I think, is, sort of a Alice in Wonderland world in which, in the name of election integrity, what you are doing is undermining the election. In the name of anti-weaponization, what you're doing is weaponizing. And so, the way that we prevent that kind of thing from happening is putting things in the hands of the people who are least likely to do the bad thing. And that is, in elections that are, these these sort of professional statewide election mechanisms that have been in place, and they are not perfect. And actually, there should be efforts to make sure that there's election integrity, but not coming from the president of the United States, because he obviously has an incentive to do just the opposite. And so putting it in his hands is the exact wrong thing to do.
You wonder what it would look like to have those local election officials, local law enforcement have to go up against federal pressure. I think that's unprecedented. Jake, how worried are Republicans at this point that tonight's speech puts 2020 right back at the center of this political conversation and overshadows what they actually want to be talking about?
I'm not even sure what they want to be talking about, to be honest with you. I mean, the Republicans right now are funding an unpopular war, $60 billion. Their priority at the moment is a $60 billion increase in Pentagon spending for the Iran war. It is the Save America Act or the SAVE Act, whichever version they end up passing, which doesn't really, it faces very long odds to becoming law, or not very long odds, but somewhat long odds to becoming law. And by the way, won't even be in place for this election, most likely. We're almost in August. We're halfway through July. The House is going to go out for a month. The Senate's going to maybe pass it, maybe not. So the restrictions that they're talking about and putting in place probably won't even be in law by the time voters cast their ballots later this year. I think that most thinking Republicans, meaning Republicans who don't just parrot the president, want to be talking about how to win in November. I mean, Republicans right now, speaking of Georgia, a state that the president's likely going to be talking about, they have an election in Georgia this year. And in that election, Jon Ossoff has raised, 30 times, 40 times the money that his Republican opponent, Mike Collins, has raised. So it would behoove Republicans, frankly, in a state that is a very competitive state for both parties, but Republicans do have a slight edge in Georgia, for them to focus on that. I don't understand why you don't focus on that. But, listen, I think most people just see it for what it is, which is the president's never been able to truly get over the fact that he lost Georgia in 2020. And here we are a half a dozen years later still talking about it. And there are people wiser than I who could rattle off these statistics. But the president took this to court like dozens of times in 2020, and I think lost almost every single time his challenges to the integrity of the election. So I'm not sure what the point is of all of this when there's massive legislative happenings on Capitol Hill that the president is not engaging in. But that's the path that he wants his presidency to go down. I don't quite get it.
So to put a finer point on Jake's point there, over 60 lawsuits were filed by the Trump administration alleging 2020 election mishandlings. All of them failed. 3 executive orders have now been blocked as well. What new evidence could the president lay out tonight that may change the trajectory of this?
I doubt that he lays out new evidence. I think there have been ample opportunity for people to present evidence, as, for example, in those court cases. I mean, many, just to be fair, a lot of those court cases were decided on procedural grounds, but some of them did address this particular question. And I would say even his handpicked attorney general, who examined all the evidence and would go to bat for him no matter what, had to come, had some integrity and would say, absolutely not. Like, there just wasn't. So I think that it is unlikely that there will be new evidence, at least not new evidence that there was a significant amount of fraud. And so, the question is whether there are, some statistics or things like that that make people question further question the integrity, because I think that's the end goal.